Happy now. All is now. It's a gift to be in the present. First say signing back in here. Putting on my perception into the cloud of the collective to expand the collective consciousness. You're not tuning into the mind of an alginate moon and Horus will be transiting the 10th house. Okay? So this is going to be my continuation on the Mercury placements, my interpretation on the Mercury placements. So the last video I did was Mercury in Taurus. This will be Mercury in Gemini. Alright? So Gemini is born from the 3rd house. Born from the 3rd house. Okay? Uses Mercury. Right? Uses Mercury. Right? That 3rd house dealing with your surroundings, your familiar people, places, and things. Okay? Dealing with communication. Okay? So automatically Mercury's home here. Mercury's familiar with Gemini. Okay? Mercury's familiar with Gemini. Okay? So we can say, and what do we know about Mercury? Mercury is your planet of communication. Mercury is your planet ability to write, ability to schedule, ability to process thoughts. Okay? Right? So with Mercury, with Mercury in Gemini, you can say your communication will come off as original. When people will hear you communicate, okay, people hear you communicate, come off as original, you know, because the natural way for communication, because it's mutable, okay, mutable air sign, air communicates, right, just to put out information, as opposed to Earth communicating, where Mercury is also familiar with Virgo, which is Earth, communicating to make sense. So we could say to come off as original because they're both adaptable. They're both mutable signs. They're both mutable, right? So they're both mutable. So with Mercury and Gemini, I say it's original because, yeah, being that mutable sign, it's back and forth. When we say mutable, that just means back and forth, right? Adaptable, okay? And for you to have a successful conversation or to be successful in your communication style, you have to be able to hear the other side. You have to be able to hear and process the information given to you from the other, you know, from the other being, right? So yeah, this is with Mercury in air, or Gemini to be exact. It's mutable, and that's what we're dealing with when we say the word mutable. Mutable is also probably another saying for adaptable. Okay, so you can actually hear the other side from the person you're communicating with, right? So you communicate, have a mutable way of communicating. Okay, so your communication style, you know, you're able to communicate about anything, okay, and have the conversation, keep the conversation going as long as you like, because with Mercury and Gemini, you know, communication, you know, is natural for you. Communication is almost like, yeah, communication is natural for you. You know, you will receive the mental stimulation from the communication with the Mercury and Gemini. Okay, so with the Mercury and Gemini, can hold conversations. Okay, with almost on any topic, anything you're communicating with, Mercury and Gemini will be able to hold this conversation, right? And yeah, and pick out, let's say, yeah, be able to, you know, look at, I don't want to say details because that's more Virgo. Virgo is more dealing with the details, but Gemini is more dealing with just the communication. So you can say, yeah, like I say, with that surroundings, right? So you'll be able to, let's say with Mercury and Gemini, you will be able to communicate with anyone in your surroundings, right? That you're familiar with, okay? But about almost anything, because like I said, that communication is natural for you, right? So with that Virgo, this is the light side of Mercury. This is the dark side of Mercury, okay? Because, like I said, it be making sense. Virgo makes sense with that communication. Gemini is just put that out there. Just put the communication out there. And, whoever, like, topic, let's build on that topic, with Mercury and Gemini. Okay? So, Mercury and Gemini can, let's say, they can, like I said, topic starter. We can say thoughts and ideas, receive is more geared on things you're familiar with, though. With that Mercury, let's say, because Gemini, things we're familiar with, okay? So it's not when we because Gemini is like right before Cancer. Cancer is dealing with that home, right? Waters. That's the initiating new way on how to feel, right? Adaptable communication with your surroundings. So this is familiar. You would like to communicate on things you're familiar with. That's the thing, right? Communicate with things, you're familiar with, and it's just almost like, with people you're familiar with as well, So we say, with a Mercury and Gemini, if you're not able to, let's say, with a Mercury and Gemini, if you're not able to, let's say, if they're not able to relate with you on, a level where they can see you as, close, these Mercury and Gemini, it's almost like they's almost like cousins type shit. It's almost like a cousin type vibe, where if you have like a cousin, right, that you familiar with, it's almost like y'all close, right? But you wouldn't necessarily call that person family. Cancer will more be the family, that fourth house. That's why I was pointing over there. But this is right before we get to that familiar, actual family close. Okay, so this is just dealing with the surroundings. You could say neighbor. Okay, that this house, communicating with the neighbors type shit. So it's just like, with that Mercury and Gemini, right, you was able to do the small talk, right? You can do the small talk, right, with Mercury and Gemini, but the small talk, it's almost like if you with a Mercury and Gemini, if you really like vibe with the being you're communicating, you'll be able to communicate for long periods of time, right? But if you're not really vibing with that communication style or the being you're communicating with, you'll be able to do the small talk and keep it moving, with the Mercury and Gemini, because it's almost like you really gotta be familiar, with whoever you're communicating with. You actually have to have, a something. You gotta know, you gotta know something about the person you're communicating about. Mercury, Gemini having that natural sense for jack of all trades in a bit, in a sense, it's almost like, you also like to communicate about, things you've learned, right? You communicate about things you've learned, and you also love to receive information, that you'll be able to, new topics, or that you will be able to relate with other and bring to light to show people like, hey, I'm actually learning. You know, I'm actually learning because with my communication, I bring information to you that I learned, communicate this information, and you can give me information that you learned, so I can be able to dish this out to the next being, to the next person in my surroundings. You know, with Mercury and Gemini. So there's just the communication, right? So we could say, yeah, with a Mercury and Gemini, the processing of the thoughts is not digested like the Virgo. It's not necessarily digested and made sense out of. It's just spewing out. To put, like I say, air just push communicates to push out, but air just earth makes sense out of the communication, right? So yeah, it's just communicating, keeping the conversation flowing. Like I say, with the air signs, like I say, keep the conversations blowing. They don't like to, air. You know how the air works. The air just, with the communication, they just want to keep it moving. It's not stagnant. Adaptable communication. You're adaptable. So let's say if someone, Libra can initiate new way on how to communicate, right? They can bring new topics on how to communicate, but bring new topics when communicating. But with Mercury and Gemini, it's just, just let's say, adaptable, mutable. Adapt. Let's say where someone leaves off in the communication, you can pick up where they left off in the communication instead of bringing a new topic to talk about, like the Libra, who initiates new way on how to communicate. Okay, so first it's on a now. Catch you next now. It's gonna be Mercury and Gemini.